You've now written a book about helping Islam in the Arab world heal itself. It's a chutzpah that a whitey American Jew Israeli like you would write a book telling Islam what to do. Is that not fair critique?
It's more than fair critique. I actually say that in the book. It is chutzpah. The point of the book is to say that anybody who desires to see peace in our region, that kind of transformation is an essential condition for any possibility of real peace. It's not about territory. It's not about agreements. It's not about maps.
All right, folks, Yishai Fleischer here. I'm at the JNS conference in Jerusalem. Aryeh Green, longtime player in the political and Israeli Hasbara scene. Aryeh, tell us a little bit about your background. What's your story? What's your life about? I know you for many years, but kind of like, where have you been?
So in brief, thank you for asking. The truth is, Yishai, I have a relatively eclectic background with 9 generations in America. My great-great-great and so on grandfather was known as the Patriot Rabbi Gershom Mendes of the Spanish and Portuguese Jewish Synagogue in New York. He was one of the participants in the inauguration of George Washington. So a very strong Jewish identity, very strong American identity. And when I made Aliyah 40 years ago, my grandmother on that side of the family, felt that I was betraying our American Jewish heritage until I sat her down and we walked through where did our family come from. They came through London, before that Amsterdam, before that Portugal, before that Spain, and guess how and when we got to Spain? Well, like the rest of the Jews in Spain, obviously from the expulsion by the Romans. And therefore that element of my decision to make Aliyah and to throw my lot in with this wonderful experience in return sovereignty of the Jewish people in our ancestral homeland was literally coming full circle for a family with a very strong Jewish identity. And then I became.
Well, I need to pause you for a second because what you just said was a very beautiful. It's a very beautiful story to me because you really took a grandparent and said to them, "Listen, it's true we're American, but here's the Jewish story. Here's who we really are." It's a mamash what it says, "V'heshiv lev avot al banim." It's as though you spoke to the grandparents from a child's point of view and said, "But we're coming back to our land. We're repatriating. We're remigrating to the land," and you convinced her. And that's really, there's something very deep about that story.
It was for me a very important part of my journey, my spiritual journey, becoming more observant. Because the combination of being a Zionist and wanting to be part of this return to our sovereignty in our land, as well as becoming more observant, it was very important to me that my grandmother, in fact, both of my grandmothers, recognized that this was not a rejection of their commitment to the American Reform, liberal or non-observant even experience, but rather a return to what, and I literally said to her, Gershom Mendes, Rabbi Gershom Mendes, was the first American-born leader of the Jewish community in America, and guess what? Back in 1746 or 42 when he was born, and in 1770, 80, 90, when he was the leader of the American Jewish community, there was no reform. There were very few non-observant Jews, and so the idea of returning to an Orthodox observance became something that was a familial return. So I appreciate your picking up on that.
Oh, it's very interesting, and you're also linking up what the Bible links up, which is the return to the land of Israel is also a return to God. And by the way, that's what Herzl said at the first Zionist Congress, 1897. His first words were return to the land of Israel is a return to Judaism, which is a very, very interesting thing.
Right, which a lot of people don't know because they think of Herzl as secular.
It's there's a lot of misreading about Herzl. That could be a podcast on its own, and there's been books written on it. But you've also had a very interesting career here in Israel. Why don't you give us a little snapshot of that?
A little snapshot is that I've been in private business as an executive in various multinational publicly traded companies and private companies and a consultant to many of Israel's leading companies. I spent the last 10 years helping to bring renewable energy to Africa, a company called Gigawatt Global. Now I'm one of the founders of our non-profit entity called Gigawatt Impact, doing more of the similar type of thing of bringing renewables to Africa. Before that, I spent a decade running a project called Media Central, a project of honest reporting, which provided services for the foreign press who were based in or visiting Israel.
And I've been interviewed many times by Media Central people and always answer their call because they're reputable and very serious.
Thank you.
And you also worked for...
I spent a decade working with Natan Sharansky.
With Natan Sharansky, that's how I remember that very much.
In the Prime Minister's office, helping to promote both democracy and freedom here in the Middle East, and the initial work of the Israeli government supporting supporting specifically Jewish students on college campuses in America and Europe. That was my brief for Natan back 20 years ago. What goes around comes around. We used to say, well, anti-Semitism is increasing all over the world, so since we're responsible for anti-Semitism for the government, we're obviously a great success.
Well, that's definitely, we can discuss how really the Jewish people saw the American campus experience deteriorating and yet allowed it to happen, and maybe the failure of some Jewish organizations. I think that that's something that should be discussed more openly in the Jewish world. I think there should be more question of accountability, but that's for a separate podcast today. With all of your very interesting background, we talked about the various streams that are inside of you. You are here at the JNS conference in Jerusalem talking about something completely different, which I found fascinating. I asked you to come over to my table to do a podcast, and that's your new book is called Finding Peace in the Promised Land. Immediately, it irked me. I don't like the word peace because the word peace is oftentimes associated with land giveaway, etc. And I didn't know what this book was, but since I knew you, I asked you, what is it really about? And you actually told me to read the subline here, and it says, From Hatred to Humanity, 5 Transformative Steps to Resolve the Arab-Israeli Conflict. And yet even this didn't give it away. This is actually a book about 5 steps for the Arab and Muslim world to heal itself from anti-Semitism, maybe to heal its society, to help it actually get into health, because we know that it's not healthy. By the way, when I talk with Arabs, I'm always reminding them, I'm like, you guys are making a lot of trouble, but your societies, and I use rough language with them sometimes, I say, your societies are crap. Look around at Damascus, this great old city. It's garbage. Look at Cairo. It's garbage, okay? You guys are in tough shape. What are you guys giving us a hard time instead of listening? But that's one of the ways that I talk to them. But you've now written a book about helping Islam in the Arab world heal itself. This is I would say, a chutzpah. It's a chutzpah that a whitey American Jew, Israeli like you would write a book telling Islam what to do. Is that not fair critique?
It's more than fair critique. I actually say that in the book. It is chutzpah. But one of the things that I say in the book, especially in the prologue, is I am not here, Latif Musar, I'm not here to tell the Arab or Muslim society what they need to do. It's up to them. What the point of the book is to say that anybody who desires to see peace in our region, that kind of transformation is essential, is an essential condition for any possibility of real peace. It's not about territory, it's not about agreements, it's not about maps, it's about a transformative process where the Arab and Muslim societies, their leadership, and it's one thing I talk about a lot in the book, there are moderate, centrist Muslims and Arabs who I know personally, who unfortunately don't have that much of a following in most Muslim and Arab societies. But when we look at, for instance, the Abraham Accords, the United Arab Emirates, where I've been to on business, or Bahrain, where there is an embrace of the people of Israel's return to the land of Israel as the indigenous people here with a natural place in the Levant, that's the kind of acceptance which we didn't have in Jordan, in Egypt, certainly not with the PLO. The conceptual framework to say peace will come when the Arab and Muslim leadership begins to foment this kind of acceptance and forgiveness and a sense of purpose. These are the transformative steps which came from my first book.
I just want you to know, this is the reason I really wanted to interview you, because this is a topic that's dear to my heart. I often find myself talking with Arabs and thinking about psychology in what for example, I'll give you an example, and you can riff right off of it. I say to Arabs, Shuf, look with your eyes. Look, Allah has brought us back to this land. Do you think that you have not defeated us because we're bigger than you or richer than you? No, it's because Allah wills it. And He did not let us take your lands. He let us take our land only. And that's where we have victory, because this land was granted to us. And it's in your Quran. And I speak to them that way. And they're always shocked by this kind of intra-Arab discourse. By the way, they have an answer to that, to my claims, and I can talk about that. But my point is that I am interested in the Arab psyche. And you're saying something very deep. You're saying if we want to have peace in this region, we got to help effectuate the Arab psyche. So why don't you give us one of your 5 tips, just so we get a sense of it?
It's kind of funny. I will riff on what you just said, and I'll give you one of the 5. But this book, I can sum it up as I basically just did in a few sentences, the main thesis of it. So what do you need a 260-page book for? So what I did with the help of Muslim Arabs like Khaled Abu Tuameh and Muhammad Dajani and others was most of the book are proof tests from Muslim and Arab thinkers, Quran, the Hadith, medieval thinkers, modern thinkers and leaders, political, religious, theological, spiritual, to make the case that, as you're saying, the Quran and Muslim tradition and Arab culture recognizes both the value of moderation, of acceptance, of coexistence, of the Jewish connection to our land, etc. In other words, it's not a foreign Western idea, kumbaya, let's all live together, but it's a very Muslim and also Christian, by the way, Arab approach to these issues. And one of the reasons I wrote the book was to amplify the voices of those moderates calling for coexistence. And so, for instance,
but the word moderate is not. You're right. Of course, it is a moderate, but it's not just moderate. What you're saying is it's actually authentic and indigenous to
traditional Islamic thought. Well, that is Muhammad Dajjani, you may know, is the leader of a movement called Wasatiyah. Wasatiyah is literally an Arabic translation for Maimonides, for the Rambam's golden mean, the Derech HaZahab. In other words, the idea of a middle path, Wasatiyah means middle path, which is to be, which includes issues of acceptance and tolerance and embrace and includes issues of recognition of the Jewish connection to our land, etc. And so the 5 steps, I can just describe them very briefly. They come from my first book, which I mentioned, My Israel Trail, which was about my hike on the Israel Trail after my devastating divorce, which included all sorts of elements of the land of Israel, the people of Israel, our geography, and a lot of personal growth issues. And these were the 5 transformative elements that helped me to heal from my divorce and that have helped others in their personal growth or dealing with their own challenges. And I basically apply them to the Arab-Israel conflict. And they are humility, a sense of our place in the universe.
By the way, I think that is what I also find with Christians. I find that the real pro-Israel Christians are the ones that have this humility. Yeah. They see that God is doing great things with Israel. They want to be part of it, and they don't come to me telling me exactly what my theology should be. They're here to listen, and I find that humility is a tremendous. And by the way, I also think that Israel could always use a shot at humility, and I'm always talking about it.
Absolutely.
I'm always talking about it.
The Americans and the Europeans in
humility.
Absolutely.
And I am the paragon of humility. Okay, let's continue.
Nobody's as humble as you are.
Yeah. So I'm the award-winning for humility. Yeah. Go ahead.
So humility leads to also an acceptance of the reality that we're facing, both Arabs and Jews, accepting this is our history, this is what's happening, this is the reality on the ground, let's deal with it. Then we move to a sense of gratitude, which permeates both of our traditions and also Christianity as well. Gratitude for the blessings that we do have. I don't care whether you're Arab and you're grateful for your oil resources, or you're Jewish and you're grateful for our return to sovereignty in our land. There is so much to be grateful for, but that pales in comparison to perhaps the hardest element for all of us. The 4th element is forgiveness. The ability to forgive, for the Jews, to forgive the Arabs and Muslims, their 100 years of violent rejection of and terror and murder and mayhem. And we have to acknowledge the Arabs themselves, those are particularly who have been personally affected by our defensive military operations. They have to forgive us for our defensive activities, which has also caused injury and death and destruction. So forgiveness may be the hardest thing that we
can accept that, even though I think it's justified. I can accept.
Oh, of course it's justified. Yeah. But the forgiveness is still necessary, because if you've had your children killed by a
1,000%
a justified defensive military action, you still lost your children.
Yeah.
And forgiveness is an integral part of Muslim and Christian, and of course, Jewish tradition. So there's an authenticity to focusing on that as a necessary step. And the 5th step is a sense of purpose. Frankl's Man's Search of Meaning.
Sure.
Hirsch Goldberg brought that into the situation in Gaza with the hostages. There is an integral part of, obviously, in Judaism and also in Islam. Islam doesn't talk about tikkun olam or making the world a better place, but it does have a tradition, which we don't hear a lot about, which includes the issue of the betterment of humanity. So if the Muslim and Arab leadership continues to foment a sense of purpose, which is we must destroy the West, we must destroy all infidels, we must destroy Israel, that's not what we're talking about. If, like the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain and others in who I will call moderate Arab and Muslim leaders, if their sense of purpose, like ours, is to build a peaceful society that will provide for the betterment of their own societies and peaceful coexistence and the betterment of humanity.
And the betterment of our region and growth
Absolutely.
and hospitals and tourism and roads and decency and cleanliness and clean water and joy for our kids. And it doesn't have to be like Western bacchanalia. It doesn't have to be like total hedonism, but
It's not a Western country.
right. But a goodness for our children, a region that's flourishing, a region that turns green. It's an outlook that's very much missing around here and very much stymied in the Arab world. Many times we discount their culture because we see that they don't have these basic principles, and we're just like, you guys just are animals and you don't get it, and we just reject them. But it is there somewhere. It's been hidden.
It's an undercurrent. What we see, obviously, the culture of hatred and death worship that permeates the societies of our real enemies, like Hamas, like Fatah in the Palestinian Authority. That's what we see in the news. What we're not aware of is, for instance, I was just speaking with an expert from the Institute of National Security Studies about the vast majority of Iranians who, in an authoritative poll in 2025, 92% of Iranians said, we want this regime of the mullahs to end.
Right.
There is a groundswell across Arab and Muslim society. We haven't even talked about Malaysia, Indonesia, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, other moderate, what I'm calling moderate Kurds, without question, Islamic or Arab societies. So the last part of my book then takes all of this and creates and presents practical steps on all different levels: education, political, diplomatic.
Well, I want to talk about that, and we have to keep it tight here. But I want to ask like this: as you could see, I'm interested in this issue. I've been amazed at the lack of messaging from Israel to the Arab world. We have plenty of fabulous Arab speakers. One of my mentors, Mordechai Kedar, Dr. Kedar is all around here. I mean, he doesn't just speak Arabic; he speaks Arabic, and
with an Arab cultural understanding, not just translating Western concepts.
Right, he's not AI. He really understands them, and we don't push out these messages. We don't push them out. We push out all kinds of Western ninny messages that just don't resonate with that world. And they have come to believe all the lies that the left has taught about us. And we never say to them, we're an ancient people. We're back in the land. Allah is with us. You could be a part of the blessing. You should bless the children of Abraham. They don't use the language is not used, and it's a shame. Does your book, and do you have a vision to help the Israeli government and other non-governmental organizations push out and help Arabs, Muslims come to this consciousness?
Without question, and I appreciate the question, because obviously that is the point of the final chapter, is pragmatic and practical steps on all of these different levels, including recognizing those groups which are active in these areas and calling for specific types of actions, including that. And it's one of the things that actually we can learn from the United Arab Emirates and the leaders of Bahrain and Sudan and Morocco, because that's the language that they use to justify to their own people, and I believe authoritatively and correctly, why they have turned to an embrace of the Jews, the people of Israel, and recognition of the legitimacy of Israel.
Abraham Accords is a big deal for a person like you. Absolutely. It's the beginnings of something. And for me as well. And, I'm considered a hardcore right-wing guy, whatever associations I had with Minister Ben-Gvir, for example, whatever it is. And yet the Abraham Accords and this language that we're using right now is very dear to me.
Right. It's not about kumbaya. And that's actually one of the biggest issues is, I write about this in the prologue. I've been writing this book for 8 years.
Wow.
Since my first book, where I actually excised all sorts of references to the Arab-Israel conflict, because my publisher said, you've got a book about your hike on the trail and the history of Israel and the people you met and geography, and you've got another book about the personal growth and the lessons you learned to get over your divorce that people can learn from. That has to be another book. So that was 8 years ago. And so for 8 years, I've been struggling to find a way and a context in which this book will have resonance for policymakers, for educators, for leaders, for religious leaders. The Abraham Accords is the positive impetus that showed that this conceptual framework of an embrace of Israel, not for economic or military strategic interests like Egypt's peace agreement or Jordan's peace agreement or the Palestinian, the PLO, but for real religious, philosophical, principled, ideological reasons to have peace with Israel and the Jews. And on the negative side, October 7th was, and forgive me for saying so, literally, I think for many of us, a liberating turn of events. Because now, the first versions of this book, I was at pains to, and I read about this in the prologue, I was at pains to provide a balance. The Arabs have to do this, the Israelis have to do this, the Muslims have to do this, the Jews have to do this. Now, let's agree, Jews and Israelis do have work to do also.
Right.
But the primary source of our conflict is now recognized because it is that ideology that led to October 7th. And therefore, we're now free to say, we are now going to tell the truth.
Right.
We are going to ensure that this truth, with a capital T, a Gandhian understanding, which I studied at UC Berkeley with Mark Juergensmeyer, a Gandhian understanding of conflict resolution says you have to recognize the truth with a capital T. And that's a big part of the ability to make this argument now, as an Israeli, as a Jew, as an American, to the leaders of the Muslim and Arab world, and to the policymakers like a Jared Kushner, Stephen Witkoff, President Donald Trump, Vice President Vance, and especially Secretary of State Marco Rubio, if you're listening to this, how important it is to recognize that negotiations over this or that particular element, including missiles and support for terror, as well as nuclear capabilities, has to include, these agreements, these discussions have to include this ideological, rejectionist, violent opposition to Israel's existence and the Jewish place in the region.
In other words, get to the root of it. Let's look. We know what's behind this. It's a sick ideology. It needs to be healed. This region can get better. That's why your book is called Finding Peace. Right. Finding Peace in the Promised Land.
And moving from hatred to humanity.
Aryeh Green, and very important stuff. I really hope that this book also comes out in Arabic. I hope that it gets to the UAE and to those people, and help those people put out this kind of ideology and message, philosophical message. And I also think that Israel's got to learn to adapt a language that works towards our Arab neighbors.
These themes from the Quran, from Arab and Muslim leaders.
Yeah,
agreed.
And as usual, as I say oftentimes, it's not even just the words, it's the posture. There's a posture that you're talking about here that's very important. I want to thank you so much for being with me here at JNS. I want everybody to check out this book, Aryeh Green, Finding Peace in the Promised Land, and may we indeed find peace in the Promised Land.
Amen.
All right, folks. Aryeh Green with me, Shai Fleischer, at the JNS Conference 26 in Jerusalem. God bless you wherever you are. Stay tuned, stay connected, stay part of the story. And maybe in this conference today, we've made steps and strides towards a better, stronger Middle East for all the children of Abraham. And shalom.